Oh my God!
I mean, top notch and
Please don't get him started.
This is the Mothers Aren't Better panel. I would say companion panel to Father Knows Worse, but they're separate and distinct panels. Okay. Here we're going to talk about mothers who are usually considered nurturing, caring, and loving. What happens when that all goes wrong? How do their children turn out? Are their children going to be terrible, or are they going to reject their mothers as the others do with their fathers and go on to do great things? So we have some villains who have been influenced by the mothers as well as their heroes. So I'm going to start by letting my panelists introduce themselves. We'll start on the other side down there.
My name is Nadyne Bush. My participation in this is I'm a mom of 3 and an evil stepmother, so I think that qualify.
If you say it out loud, it's not true.
My name is Hanako M. I'm the creator and host of the Fandom Hybrid podcast. We are a pop culture podcast. We do recaps and reviews of TV shows and film. We also talk a lot about the Atlanta convention scene. I've been a regular panelist here at CONjuration for about 5 years now. I've been a panelist at DragonCon for the last 12 years. Also at ATL Comic Convention, Nerdy Gras, and Monsterama.
Hey guys, my name is Michael Collins. I am a theory prognosticator and dad joke enthusiast. I'm also with the Fandom Hybrid podcast. This is my 3rd year doing panels at CONjuration, and I just finished my 1st year of a full slate of panels at DragonCon this year as well, and it's fun.
And I am Anthony Liggins, the moderator for this panel, and also a co-host of the Fandom Hybrid podcast. The genesis of this panel was the first time we did a panel like this was Fathers Know Worse, and a lot of people were interested in talking about mothers. So we did this panel we did at ATL Comic Con Comics Convention, and we're doing it here for the first time. So before we get into it, I know that you guys have some mothers that you want to talk about offhand. Just so you know, this is not a therapy session. We're not going to give the therapy to these mothers. They are who they are, and we can't do anything about it. Everybody's opinion is valid, and there will be spoilers possibly. Okay, so let's start on the end with Nadyne. Do you have any evil stepmothers that you relate to or want to talk about? I'm not meaning it that way.
No, I think at the end of the last panel we mentioned Disney and how many evil stepmothers are there in fiction and in Disney movies where she's always the princess. She's daddy's little princess, but somehow daddy isn't there either. So there's this evil stepmother who hates the kid, who wants the kid out of her life. So the huntsman or whoever they are, take them out into the woods and leave them and get this kid out of my life.
Jeez.
That's a very good trope that they use over there at Disney, the evil stepmother, and then they have the child actually overcoming all the efforts of the evil stepmother. But Cinderella's stepmother is particularly interesting because of how her daughters turn out.
Right.
I wonder if that's all because of her influence.
Well, I think there's that concept of, because there is a difference, and being a stepmom I found was very different from being a mom, because basically as a stepmom you don't have a lot of power, so to speak. I mean, if there's imminent danger, then yes, but if you listen to therapists or whatever, they say it's not your job to discipline. It's not your job to get involved. It's the biological parent. And if the child still has a living mother, then, I'm sure there is that talk of, well, she's just, the stepmother, or she can't tell you what to do. And, it's a difficult place to be.
Equal stepmom,
Yeah.
This is interesting.
Because if you look at it, like how deadly this is, how
Harry. Mhm.
Yeah.
I mean, your dad's dead go.
Yeah,
Oh,
she didn't
wow.
want to have anything to do with it. So but I think there is that, especially in film, there's that image of of Cinderella, of, oh, these are my daughters, here, I want them to marry the prince. You go,
You go sit
slaughter the
down.
hogs and, get out of my life.
Right.
Hanukkah?
So I said that I was gonna try to find some moms that were kind of toxic or absentee, and I thought about it. There's a whole show full of them, and it's called The Vampire Diaries. Like literally every single mother except for Caroline Forbes' mom, they're either not there or they've abandoned their child for whatever reason, or it's so toxic. Like literally, you can name off the main characters and their parents and talk about what crappy parents there are. First, Tyler's mom was probably the most present mom in the whole series, so that's saying something because she was trash too.
Yeah.
But like, I'm going to be using that word a lot to these trash parents because they are. I mean, if you think about Elena's parents, like her actual birth mother was like a baby mama to her uncle and gave her up. And then when she found out who her mom was, the mom had turned to a vampire. She still didn't want her. Same thing. Bonnie's mother. Bonnie's mother left her because she felt tied down having to be a parent, and she abandoned her child and just kind of came back into her life, whenever. Same thing with, like, literally that whole show is full of toxic parents. And like, yeah, it's a thing. And we're actually we're planning on doing a offshoot podcast next year talking about just Vampire Diaries stuff. So we'll go into this a lot more then because I have things to say.
Mike?
All right. So I started this thinking about Donna January, who is Starlight's mother and the boys, but then I started thinking, you know what? If you're a mother and you allow your child to be injected with compound V for money, then you're a trash mother. So almost every mother, except for any mother who actually allowed their child to be injected with a dangerous chemical to become a superhero and gain fame and fortune, is a trash mother. So that's almost every mother on The Boys and Gen V,
And Jimmy.
especially Gen V, because we see the opening scene when she gets her period. And her mother's like, oh, I bet she's going to get her powers now. But she ends up getting killed by her daughter who can't control the powers that she just got. And she ends up killing her mother and father. And Ellie and her sister now think she's a monster and doesn't see her anymore. So it's like her parents didn't even, she had no idea about that. And that is the epitome of trash, where you just let your daughter get their period and get their powers and not explain to them what the hell's going on at all.
Okay, I will say this about that parent. I don't think at the time she was thinking powers, because I'm the mother of two girls and I am a woman. So anytime you're in the bathroom right around that age and you have those kind of that weird vibe, she knew her daughter was about to get her period. And I think that child was old enough to where you should have explained that to her, because she really didn't know what was going on at first.
Right.
Then when the blood starts floating in the air, now you've got a second problem because this child has no idea she's a soup. So it's again, we can go back to that whole, you're supposed to be preparing your children for things, even though you didn't know about the powers, because one of the things about Gen V is you don't know what your powers will be until they manifest,
Right.
which is a whole other topic, because you could have something that's so innocent, so smart, like crickets, powers. Like, that's not really harmful to anyone. But then you have something like, let's say, Ryan's from The Boys, being Homelander's son, even though he wasn't injected with Gen V, but still, you don't know what that child is going to do until
Or like Emma just touching her brother, telling him to get lost, and he literally gets lost.
Yeah.
It's like,
Cricket's mother is really
Oh my gosh, she's
Because
horrible.
She's literally all about exploiting her. And that's all she wants to do.
Right.
And that puts her in a terrible place. For me, I always go back to my old faithful with Cersei Lannister. But I think I want to talk more about Thalia al Ghul, who is Damien's father in Batman. Mother, I'm sorry. Well, she had the father's name.
Yeah.
And I spent a lot of time talking about Bruce because he's terrible. But Thalia isn't any better. I mean, she has him trained to be a murderer from day one. Like that is what he's supposed to do. And to become a member of the assassins, you have to kill someone. So he has obviously killed someone. And he's like only 13 years old. So for her to have, I'm not saying raised her properly, but you would think that some kind of thing in her would be like, this is my child. I need to make sure he's okay. Not make sure that he's able to kill anyone who tries to kill him. Like, that's not how your thinking should be. You should be trying to raise him, just like Bruce. Why are you doing it? I'm not going to talk about it. But, so that is a mother that really just sticks out to me. Her and Cersei, I think, are awful. Hanako and I got into it about Cersei earlier. And I said everything Cersei did really was to protect her children.
And she was still a trash parent.
I did not argue about her being a trash parent.
She had her children with her brother. I'm just saying.
After she was told by a prophet that her children, born blonde of hair, would die.
Yeah. So, but those actions really, I don't think had much influence on how her children became. I think the inbreeding had more to do with it than anything that she did, because Joffrey is insane.
I mean, the fact that they were inbred makes her a trash mother anyway.
Yeah.
Does Thalia get any credit for even slightly improving on her own upbringing and character? Or is it undiscernible from what she was raised?
Only in that to save Damien from her father, she shipped him off to Bruce.
Well, I mean, I would argue, because on the surface, it looks like she just does it to Damien. And she might have been. But maybe subconsciously, I mean, the best thing she could possibly do for this kid is to send him to who's arguably the best father. Set that up.
Oh my God.
I
Here we
think
go.
it depends on what iteration of Thalia you're reading or watching.
Batman the Animated Series. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. So I think generally speaking, I think most versions of Thalia would choose to send him to Bruce than to leave Damien to the monster or father that she knows is a monster. So I would give her credit for that. Anyone else have any mothers they would like to? Because it can be any mother or maternal figure.
Oh yeah.
Thinking who?
Mother Gospel.
From
Rapunzel.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
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 True.
Yeah. Just
Yeah.
Like it could be a matriarchal figure.
Yeah, anybody.
If you want to call her matriarch.
Yeah.
If you want to call her that.
I've often wondered what on earth the media was thinking. I guess it was 80s, 90s, Fresh Prince, and then I can't remember all the spin-offs, and there were other ones. The parents were absolute morons, but these kids were brilliant. They were always doing these wonderful things. The kids were great, the parents were stupid. The Huxtables,
Yes.
she was a doctor, and yet she was another sort of trash mother.
Yeah. She was a
Um,
lawyer. He was a doctor.
Yeah, that's right. Pardon me.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, please.
I was a child of the 80s.
Yes. And then there was wasn't there the whole iCarly thing where again, the parents aren't even in this. Yes, again, it's a kid show. But again, I mean, these kids are running amok. So I don't understand the media, why they were portraying parenting and mothering in that way.
Well, yeah, that's what I was gonna say because that generation, our generation, when we were kids, even though my mom was a stay-at-home mom for a very long time, like she didn't start working until I was in high school, but a lot of kids back then were latchkey children because at that point both parents were
Right.
working,
Mhm.
and you would come home and you literally get in the house, lock the door, don't answer the door,
Yep.
don't answer the
Right.
telephone, whatever the case may be. And so I could see why they would not have the parents kind of just or have the parents just in the background. But as far as like the kids being brilliant and the parents being stupid, I hate to say it. I work in education. I listen to it every day.
Yeah. As a teacher.
So I work in support and I have to deal with
Stupid
parents calling, and sometimes it's like your child is so smart, but you just ask the dumbest questions.
Mhm.
Like
and
when the
it's-
interview coaches after games or in the game. Well, what were you thinking? Well, I don't know.
Mhm.
Yeah. So
And I'm gonna go with every mother in Umbrella Academy.
okay, so
I'm sorry, they stole their kids. They were
yeah.
Yeah.
Every
Some of
mother
those
in
were
the
poverty related. Every single
Mhm.
mother.
Yeah.
To be fair, they were planning on this.
I know, but
Yeah.
just
Yeah, because if you get pregnant and you give birth within 24 hours, yeah, I kind of, I might like, I'm not saying I would sell my child, but like for, I think it was Vanya's mother, the one who was in the swimming pool.
Yeah.
Like, she's literally a child. She's a teenager. And all of a sudden you're pregnant and giving birth like within 2 hours of kissing a boy. Like, what? Yeah,
Baby gotta go.
I can't. So we talked about this with the father's panel, and we talked about it with some other stuff. So I think sometimes your circumstances kind of dictate how you are. If I was a parent, if I was one of those mothers that found myself in that position, I can't say what I would do because one, you're not emotionally prepared for this. Like you have a whole human, and just a few hours ago, you're probably just like whatever playing with dolls or something. Like I said, Vanya's mother was a teenager, but you're not emotionally prepared for it. You're not financially prepared for it. And then depending on where you are in the world, you show up fully pregnant or with a baby within 24 hours. Somebody, if you're in Salem and that happens, they're gonna reconstruct the the pyres to put you on because they're gonna think something is wrong with you. So
Right.
it's kind of like I can't say that they are trash mothers because those circumstances were so extreme.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, they weren't there, and then of course, when you get into the multiverse version of that, all of those parents were killed because of something that Vanya did, and the other, trying to help someone, and it had that effect. So I'm not sure I would exactly call them trash mothers. I think again, we talk about sometimes parents doing the best they could under circumstances. If a billionaire comes up to you and says, "Hey, you can give me your child, I'll raise them, whatever." For some, that might actually be a better thing because if you're not prepared, I mean, even just in regular life, there are a lot of parents who have children that they are not ready to have, that they are forced to have with all of these laws that are coming into place. And they may not be able to give that child a life that they're deserving of. But if a billionaire walks in and says, "Hey, I want children, I'll take your child, I'll take care of it," you might be like, "Okay, yes." Now, they should have got more than $3,000 if that was going to be the
Right,
case.
yeah.
So
But
that's what you're saying is Bruce Wayne should have been.
you know what? We're not going to talk about Bruce Wayne.
So you're talking about mothers being in specific or certain circumstances, maybe dictating the outcomes. So I was thinking about Sarah Connor. The circumstances she had trying to raise John Connor, like you are living in fear for your life.
Mhm.
But did a lot of that just come from her PTSD, what happened to her before? Or was she literally trying to raise this kid to be a general who's going to lead them?
I mean, told her it was coming.
Yeah.
And so.
Yeah.
I mean, this thing to think about is like this guy comes from the future, and you're being chased by a cyborg, and next thing you know, you guys have just intermittent sex in a department store, and then after he gets killed, after you kill the cyborg, you're pregnant, and you look at the picture that he gave you, you're like, I don't believe this shit. The next thing you know, someone takes a picture, and it's the same picture, and you're like, God damn it. what are you gonna do? It's like, fine.
Yeah.
It's like you have kind of have to raise them like that. So it's like she really didn't have that much of a choice. I wouldn't necessarily say that she's a bad mother. I mean, she did keep him alive.
You know, it's funny because now that
You got,
I mean,
these things have levels. There's
but
levels
like
to this.
you bringing up Sarah
Anything that helps you.
Connor just made me think because she has a lot of parallels to John Winchester.
Oh, yeah.
If you think about it, like you have these circumstances and you're really trying to keep these children alive or this child alive. And yeah, I think both parents kind of went to the extreme because it's like those children didn't have chances to be children. But if they had, I think the world that they ended up living in would have been totally different. Like, think about it if Sam and Dean had never become hunters, you know, or if, you know, if Sarah had never raised her child to believe all of this stuff about the future. Like, if he said, man, you are crazy, I'm not thinking about none of this. And then you have I'm thinking the Sarah Connor Chronicles, you have a Crow Marty show up in your classroom and try to kill you. It's like if he had died then, like, so yeah, I think you just, with circumstances like that, you just do the best you can, and especially if you already know what's coming. Like literally, somebody came from the future and said, "Hey, this is what's going to happen, and your child is going to be this." They're coming from the future; they've already seen it. So you know, she could have done maybe something different to change that future, but again, I think it just probably would have been way worse. Like you really don't. There's not a right way or a wrong way to handle a situation like that. So
Well, let me ask the panelists this. So, do you think the circumstances of the child you're raising, like especially for your mom, do you think that influence you? Is that going to influence you that much? Like, don't you have something in you to say, well, I also need to impart these values as well? Like, it's not just the circumstances, but it's also teaching them things like love and sharing and kindness. Because I don't see Sarah Connor giving any of that to John.
So I think in the movies, I agree. I think there's a bit of a distance there with her. She's not the most emotionally capable parent. If you look at the TV show, you know, the Sarah Connor Chronicles, I think she was a little bit different. And again, Lena Headey, who was our Cersei Lannister, she was great in that role. But I think so. You do want to impart those values on your children, and I do think with some of them, that's what's missing, and that kind of emotionally stunts them. But at the same time, if your sole purpose is to keep your child alive,
Some things have to
then
fall by the wayside. Yeah.
I think especially for those kinds of extreme circumstances, like if you're talking about just regular humans, then yes, I think we would probably take more care. But you're talking about circumstances that have either supernatural or a science fiction fantasy type element to it. So it's a little bit different. Like I can say if I want to teach my child about growing up in this world where, you know, let's talk about real world where people will shoot random people on the street or whatever. You can prepare them for that, but that's not an active threat. Like I don't fear for my children every single time they walk out the house, or at least not my girls so much. My son is different because he's a black male, and we know how that narrative is in our country. But it would be so different if I knew things like wendigos and demons and all of these other things exist and are actively hunting for my children. If I like in the case of John Winchester, even though we're talking about the mothers, like if I know that my wife made a deal for the devil or a demon to take my son, I know that child is actively on this list. Like he's going to be actively sought after. So I think I probably would focus more on the protection aspect of it and learning to defend yourself. Unfortunately, learning to kill if you need to, as opposed to, oh, here, I love you, whatever. Because I think in that kind of situation, the fact that I'm trying to teach you how to survive, I think for those types of parents translates into love.
Nadine?
I think in terms of abilities, if we talk about supernatural or if we talk about disabilities, I think as a mom, your role is to train your child to be a contributing member of society. So yeah, you might have all these wonderful powers, or you might be brilliant or artistic or whatever, but you still have an obligation to make sure that the child fits into society. And I think in a lot of situations, in the media, we don't see that.
Well, I mean, sometimes you just don't have time for niceties. It's like, especially if you have to train. I didn't even think about the parallels between the Winchesters and Laura and Sarah Connor. That's actually really really good parallel. But it's like if you know that you have to train your child to be a leader, to actually like to do things that don't require him to be able to play patty cake or sing a song or play baseball or do any of that stuff. It's like you're kind of going to want to show him where he needs to do. You need to be harder on him because life's going to be hard. It's not going to be easy for him. You know that he's going to have a hard life coming up. So you can't coddle him because that could possibly hamper what he has to do. You have to show him. You don't necessarily have to show him, not throw him into the middle of a war zone, but you have to be hard on him and get him disciplined. And and make sure that he knows that when I need to do something, I have to do something. Or if this requires me doing something difficult, I can do something difficult. So you really don't have time. He really doesn't have time for G.I. Joe characters. He just has time to shoot people like G.I. Joe. So,
but I don't think Cersei Lannister, in particular, she didn't instill any niceties in her son. He's a horrible person. He was at 13, 14?
Mm-hmm.
He was horrible.
But I will say this too. I think also for Joffrey, he also had the influence of Robert Baratheon more so than the younger two did, and I think that contributed because Robert was a horrible human being. Just the way that he talked to Joffrey every time we saw him on screen, like he was always berating him, always belittling him. And I think that probably had a lot to do with the way that Joffrey's attitude, because if you see the later seasons when we meet Tommen and Marcella, they are completely different. They are both very sweet. They're both very, very innocent, and they have none of Joffrey's personality traits. So but again, Robert probably would have spent more time with Joffrey because of the fact that Joffrey was the heir. He was. So yeah, I think that does.
And Robert was notorious. We're back to the father's game. Robert was notorious for being impulsive and doing whatever he wanted to do, which is something that Joffrey learned.
Yeah, and Cersei, unfortunately, Cersei coddled him. She allowed him to do whatever. Like, what mother knows? Like when Joffrey killed Roose, and Cersei knew about it, she wasn't surprised. Like, how do you know that your teenage son is so heinous and so malicious and so whatever that he would sit there and somebody gets you get your son a prostitute, and instead of him doing what he's supposed to do with the prostitute, he ends up killing her in the most hideous and like. And she knew it, and she was scared of him. And I was like, "Yeah, you didn't do what you were supposed to do as a parent."
I'm glad we're back in the Game of Thrones universe because that brings me to Alicent Hightower.
Yes.
You knew where I was going.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? You tell us.
Well, no, I was just going to say when Alicent finds out her oldest son rapes him for a base, the servant girl.
Yeah.
She just pays off the servant girl.
Yeah, she sort of does the same thing. Yeah. I don't want to say the same thing, but she's very similar to Cersei in that way that, he may not have been the heir or appointed to the heir, but you didn't teach him anything about being a royal or being a nice person or just being a good person in general. They just kind of let him do whatever he wanted.
But again, with that situation too, he had the influence of Otto Hightower. And like Alicent is very much, I feel like she's relegated to kind of like a supporting role in that because her father is the one that's so set on him becoming the heir. so set on him becoming king. Like he literally pushed his teenage daughter to go bed the king, go seduce the king, so that he would marry her, so that they would have heirs and gain a higher foothold in the kingdom. So I don't think any of that. Well, I won't say I don't think any of that is Allison's fault. Yes, she has fault to a degree, but unfortunately, because of the situation she was put in and the people who are influencing her and talking in her ear, I just don't think she really had much choice.
I think
And
she did.
mm,
I think
you know
as far
what?
as
We're going to talk about the women of Game of Thrones tomorrow at a panel, so you need to come. Yeah.
yeah, I mean because at the end of the day, that's still her child. Like that's her kid. Like those are her children.
Yes, but they are all. But it's kind of like.
And they're not as far as she knew, they were not going to have that life of being the king or whatever. So she could have raised them as a normal, group of kids.
But no, her father would not have let her do that. Because in his mind, he was always trying to force the issue. You need to convince the king to change who the heir is. You need to convince the
what
king.
does that have to like? That is something totally separate than her raising children.
Not if someone else is influencing her. Like
to just completely ignore her kids, like
no, not to completely ignore her kids, because I mean, as we see when we watch the show, she has love for her children. I think it's genuine love for her children, and she does her best to raise them to try to be decent people. But again, when you have other,
it didn't seem that way because the second one, he's not decent at all. The oldest one is not decent at all.
But again,
And
is that because of her?
Even when she realized and she's tried to slap some sense into Aries, right? She tried to slap some sense into the oldest one.
Aegon.
Mm-hmm. It's a little late now. He's too old for that. Like that's not going to work now. He is who he is. So
it seems like a lot of mothers put aside mothering and parenting for gain. There's sort of some of them are stepping on the backs of their children.
But see, that's the thing with her. That was never her intention. It's her father's influence and her father who wants the gain and who wants to sidestep it. Like you literally made your daughter go seduce your best friend's father in order to and she was a child at that point.
Yeah.
So I think when you're a child having children and then you're in those kind of circumstances, I think it's hard for her to, I won't say exert any influence, but if she tries to tell her children no, when they get unruly, when they start doing things, when they start having that whole, oh, my dad's the king, you can't tell me what to do, that sort of thing, if she tries to squash that, but then her children turn around and they go to grandpa, and grandpa's like, oh, you're going to be the future king, you can do whatever you want, this, that, and the other. I think it's going to be hard for her to have any kind of influence, no matter what her intention is. But I don't think
we didn't see any of that on screen though. Like we didn't see any. We never saw him tell kids that, oh, don't listen to her. You're gonna be king. We never saw any of that.
Well, you kind of see it once Viserys dies, and they literally both are making a play to get Aegon in their clutches, because she's like, okay, I need to get him, because if my father gets him, things are going to go to shit real quick.
I don't like you. Allison's bad mom. Period. Allison's bad. She's bad.
I'm most of the time, except for Helena. And she just does her dirty the whole way. I mean, yes, she's raised to be a sweet, lovely girl, but she doesn't really know what to do with her. Ends up marrying her. Just, that poor girl suffers for it. And that was the one child she really could have taken under her wing and really protected. Nobody really has a plan for her. Especially when everybody else seems to write her off because she's having the vision they don't know she's having. But yeah, that was her one opportunity to really be a mom and have no other influence.
This is an interesting discussion because it's very different than the one we had with the fathers. the mother thing seems to be a different, like, I don't know.
I think there's supposed to be.
Yeah.
Like I
Nurturing,
mentioned that in the
yeah.
last
Right.
panel, it's
There's
like,
supposed to be nurturing and all that.
mhm.
I was
So-
gonna go.
So I have a panel, and I'm going to ask them about that. Why is the discussion different between fathers and
Because I mean, like you said, it's social. It's something you kind of expect. You don't expect mothers to be bad mothers. You expect fathers. A lot of times in society, you expect fathers to be the one that leave the kids or be the ones that are gone, and the mothers are the ones left to shoulder the whole load and be the ones that take care of everything. But that's not the case. It's like then there are some mothers that do really bad shit, and it's not the father's fault. So there's a different thing when you don't see that. It's kind of shocking. It's kind of like, well, I don't know why. I didn't expect that. So it's kind of like you're kind of sitting there like, wow, okay, you're terrible. Was okay. You just don't know what to do. So it turns into a different conversation.
Yeah, again, it's with the social norms. It's like, we're always taught that, the moms are the ones who take care of the children. They're the nurturers. They're the ones who kind of guide the children, and the dads are the ones that are off, making the money and paying the bills. Or, for a lot of people, the dads are just pretty much non-existent in the child's life. So people expect the mothers to be the guiding hand for these children, and even though I think that shift is changing a lot, it's at least in media, we do see a lot more fathers that are being present. We do see mothers that are kind of not there, kind of telling both sides of the story. But I think still it's pretty much, mom, nurture, dad,
I don't understand
whatever.
I don't understand why it can't be both. It's like you can't already have. There's always has to be one parent is not there. Either dad's there, mom's not. Mom's there, dad's not. I mean,
Well, I think too, up until very recently, even if the dad was a better parent in a divorce situation, the kids go with the mom.
Unless the dad can prove on.
But yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean, it's got to be ridiculous. She has to practically prostitute the kids out before they'll ever even go, oh, well, maybe we could maybe try, but you've got to take parenting classes. I think that's the other thing too.
Mhm.
We've looked at and put men in a box of, oh, well, he doesn't know what he's going to do. He can't possibly know because he didn't give birth to this thing. So he can't possibly have the nurturing and know how to do this. So yes, the child must go with the mother.
Yeah.
I think.
But I'm glad you mentioned parenting classes, because even with that, men are offered that opportunity. Like, okay, if you're gonna be a single parent, or if you're gonna get custody of kids, they have that opportunity to take those classes to learn what they're supposed to do. Us as women, we are never given that opportunity. Like, they expect that just because we push these kids out, that we're supposed to instinctively know what we're supposed to do.
There's no handbook. There's no handbook
None.
to be a mom, and there's no handbook to be a stepmom.
And even if there was a handbook, no two parenting cases are alike.
No.
Like, I probably parent my children a lot different than Nadyne would, or than Mike would, or that Anthony would. So it's just one of those things where it's like, again, the burden falls usually on the women to be this parent or to be this example, and then it's just kind of like, But I mean, if you think about it, like we talk about the fathers thing, when kids go bad or they go off the rails, who's always to blame? The mother. They usually blame the mother.
Gary, sorry, you've had your hand up, Gary, for a long time.
Yeah, it kind of ties into what you're saying. It's a cultural thing, and I want to tie it into the example of a bad mother. It is the mom from The Crow when
Oh yes, Darla.
Darla, when he grabs her and tells her, mother is the name for God on the list of parts of all children.
Mm-hmm.
That's a cultural thing.
Yeah.
Part is so that I think is part of it ties into why bad mothers is because that's training to see mom is good.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, I was gonna say, along with I was one. I remember growing up, there was always the thing, the dad was the disciplinarian. just wait until your father gets home and he'll be done. So mom was always the nurturing one, taking care of good needs, but you got in trouble. Then wait till dad got home, and dad was gonna do. And then also, not only you parenting your children different than I may, if you have more than one child. This child needs to be parented this way versus this child needs, your children are different.
Yeah.
It's fascinating because the discussion with the mothers seems to be a very broad, generalized discussion with examples. And with the fathers, it's very specific examples and situations of the dad. So I just find that I may have to rethink this whole thing.
I told you these panels need to be more than they need to be 90-minute panels because we can get more into the meat and potatoes.
Still not going to therapy.
No, we're not therapy, but I think especially with fiction and the many broad worlds that we have, we can talk about fantasy, we can talk about science fiction, we can talk about superheroes, we can talk about shows where there's none of those elements, where it's just regular day-to-day people, and you can find examples of both in each of those, and all of the examples can be different, or all of them can have similarities, so.
Yeah. It's interesting because I envision this as like a surface level discussion always, and it ends up becoming.
We've never had surface level discussions
at all.
Because I wanted to talk about Draco's mom, because I didn't really think of her as a bad mom, but it wasn't like she made the situation better for him. But I think she really tried. She tried as best she could.
Well, I think at the very end, she wants her child saved. I think that she comes in as the caring mother, sort of like, oops, I really messed up, but ultimately, this is my baby, please.
That's why I wanted to bring her up for that reason.
So I think the thing with Narcissa is more complex than that, because one, you have her growing up as part of a family who are admitted Death Eaters and supporters of Voldemort. Now, by the time she became a parent, of course, Voldemort was kind of, wherever he was before he became the back of Quirrell's head. But it's like you have someone who has been brought up and who has been taught these different teachings, and she's probably one of those who just kind of told the line. Like, I don't remember if Narcissa is the older sister.
Yeah, she is older.
Okay, so you have the one. So like she's the one that all the expectations fall to. Whether or not she believed in them the way her parents did, this is what she was raised to believe. And then she ended up marrying someone who had these same beliefs and these same systems. And then you have a child. Then Voldemort comes back, like fully physical. And then you start to see kind of his obsession with being immortal, and also with the whole, let's cleanse the Muggles and the half-bloods, or that other word, and make it just about the pure bloods. And you start to see how maniacal and fanatical he gets. And maybe she starts thinking like, okay, this is not really what I signed up for. Maybe at that point she starts to see, okay, this is not really what I believe. But of course, she's deep into it now. You've married into this. Your husband is kind of sort of Voldemort's right-hand man at this time, because you've got the money, you've got the influence, you've got the power, and Voldemort is using that. So it's not like you're going to really speak up and say, hey, I don't believe in this, what you're doing, because we see what Voldemort does to people who don't follow him and who don't support him.
Yeah.
But I think towards the end, when she gets to this point and she checks on Harry and she tries to find out about Draco, I think she really, and even going before that, when you see the height from which the Malfoys have fallen, like Voldemort is literally holding court in your house and treating you like a second-class citizen, or treating you like a house elf in your own house. I think at that point, maybe she started to get to the point where she was like, okay, it's not worth this. Like, literally, my husband is emasculated. My child is running around fearful for his life because he has to do this one thing. And maybe it just gets to a point where she's like, okay, you know what? No more. You do. Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, there are things that you do for your children, and unfortunately for her, that may have been okay. You know what? Voldemort is our proximity to Voldemort is keeping us safe. Is keeping Draco from being, bullied or whatever it is she may have been thinking in her head. But then once that safety net is gone, and you are just as much in peril as everybody else, then at that point you got to make a decision, because now it's no longer safe for your child. Like, what will happen if Draco does not do this deed that Voldemort has told you to do. So you got to start thinking like, okay, is this worth it? Am I going to let my family fail? Am I going to let my husband be killed, or my son possibly be killed, just so this man can have his power and get his immortality? No, fuck that. So, yeah.
All right, well, we are out of time. I want to thank everyone for coming. Give my panelists one last chance to tell everyone who they are.
Maybe now.
Yep, you can find the three of us on the Fandom Hybrid Podcast.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Make sure you listen and watch and come back